Before we begin, viewer discretion is strongly advised. The following is for educational and entertainment purposes only. This is the verbatim federal courtroom testimony of the Sean Diddy Combs trial, as reported by Inner City Press. What's inside Diddy's personal diary that made the judge's hand shake? Why did the courtroom fall silent when the final entry was read aloud? And what names were written on the last page that caused three high-profile celebrities to immediately flee the country in a federal courtroom where Sean Diddy Combs faces grave accusations and unexpected discovery has changed everything. Not a witness statement, not a victim's testimony, but Diddy's own words found inside a burnt safe recovered from his Miami mansion just hours before it mysteriously caught fire. The diary wasn't meant to be found hidden behind a false wall and locked in a reinforced safe. These handwritten pages contain what prosecutors are calling the most damning evidence in entertainment history. The final entry, dated just one day before Diddy's arrest, wasn't just a confession. It was a detailed account of an entire network that reached the highest levels of entertainment, politics, and law enforcement. When the judge began reading those words aloud, Diddy's composed facade crumbled, his eyes widened in disbelief, his fingers gripped the table so hard his knuckles turned white, and for the first time since his arrest, the music mogul looked genuinely afraid. But what was in that final entry? Who were the names listed in what prosecutors are calling protection circle? And why did the judge immediately order the courtroom clear of all recording devices the moment he reached the last page? This isn't just a trial. It's the unraveling of an empire built on secrets that were never meant to see the light of day. The full story, raw and unfiltered, begins with that burnt safe and ends with words so shocking they might change the entertainment industry forever. If you haven't already, make sure to like this video and subscribe to stay updated on the latest developments in this unprecedented case. I'm standing outside the Manhattan Federal Courthouse, where one of the most shocking moments in legal history has just unfolded. The atmosphere is electric, with reporters frantically calling their editors and legal experts struggling to make sense of what just transpired. Inside, it started like any other day of the trial. Lawyers arranged their papers, a gallery filled with reporters and spectators, and Diddy sat with his defense team looking confident despite the serious charges against him. The judge called the court to order, and prosecutors announced they had a new piece of evidence to present. That's when everything changed. Two FBI agents wheeled in a burnt metal safe, its exterior blackened and warped from extreme heat. According to their testimony, it had been recovered from a hidden room in Diddy's Miami mansion just hours before a fire destroyed much of the property. The timing wasn't coincidental. Prosecutors suggested the fire was deliberately set to destroy evidence, but this safe had already been removed during an earlier raid. Inside the safe, the lead prosecutor announced, "We found a handwritten diary belonging to the defendant, Sean Combs. This diary contains detailed accounts of criminal activities spanning over 2 decades, including names, dates, and locations." The courtroom fell silent. Diddy's expression changed from confusion to shock to something darker, rage mixed with fear. His lead attorney immediately objected, claiming the diary wasn't included in discovery and shouldn't be admissible. The judge overruled after prosecutors explained it had only been processed by forensics. That morning, when the diary was presented to the judge, a leather-bound book with charred edges but mostly intact pages, he began reviewing it silently. At first, his expression grew increasingly troubled with each page. He turned about halfway through, he stopped, looked up at the packed courtroom, and made an unprecedented decision. Given the sensitive nature of this evidence, he announced, "I will be reading relevant portions aloud for the record. However, certain names will be redacted for now pending further investigation." Diddy leaned forward, his usual composed demeanor cracking as beads of sweat formed on his forehead. His attorney placed a restraining hand on his arm as if afraid he might lunge forward. The gallery leaned in collectively. Reporters poised their pens as the judge adjusted his glasses and began to read from the final entry. No one was prepared for what came next. The diary begins with entries dating back to 1999. The judge explained, providing context before reading the final entry. The earlier pages establish a pattern of behavior that directly relates to the charges in this case. According to the ITV judge's summary, the diary didn't just chronicle Diddy's rise to fame, it methodically documented how he built a system of influence, control, and protection. Early entries described how he identified vulnerable artists, documented their weaknesses, and used that information to maintain control. There were detailed accounts of freak-off parties where guests were secretly recorded in compromising situations, creating what Diddy referred to in his writings as insurance policies. The diary wasn't just a confession. It was a blueprint for how Diddy build his empire, not solely on musical talent, but on fear, blackmail, and strategic alliances with powerful figures in entertainment, business, and politics. As the court listened to Judge describe how the diary entries evolved over time, what started as ambitious notes from a hungry music producer transformed into the calculated records of someone who saw people as assets to be leveraged. There were lists of loyal soldiers who carried out his orders without question, and pressure points for those who resisted his influence. One particularly disturbing section detailed how Diddy would identify promising young artists, isolate them from supportive relationships, create financial dependency, and then use their careers as leverage to ensure compliance. The diary contained a chilling phrase that appeared repeatedly: once they're in a family, they never leave the family. The prosecutors explained that the diary corroborated testimony from previous witnesses who described feeling trapped in Diddy's orbit, afraid that crossing would mean not just the end of their careers, but potentially their safety. FBI forensic experts testified that the diary was authentic based on handwriting analysis, paper dating, and ink composition. They confirmed it belonged to Diddy and that attempts had been made to destroy it in the fire, suggesting consciousness of guilt. What made the diary particularly valuable as evidence was how it connected previously isolated incidents into a clear pattern of behavior. Names that had appeared throughout the investigation now showed up in Diddy's own handwriting, confirming relationships that he had previously denied under oath. As the judge continued summarizing the contents, the courtroom atmosphere grew increasingly tense. Diddy's legal team appeared visibly distressed, huddling together and passing notes frantically. One of his attorneys requested a recess, which the judge denied. The court will proceed with the final entry, the judge stated firmly, which was written on the evening before Mr. Combs' arrest. He turned to the last written page, and the courtroom fell completely silent. The final entry is dated March 24th, 2025. The judge began, his voice echoing in the silent courtroom. I will read it verbatim with only certain names redacted. He cleared his throat and began reading Diddy's own words. Meeting with redacted didn't go as planned. He says the heat is too much now that the federal investigation can't be stopped anymore. After everything I've done for him, all the campaigns I funded, all the parties I supplied, now he acts like we're strangers. Loyalty means nothing anymore. Got word that redacted is talking to prosecutors after 15 years of keeping her comfortable, keeping her relevant. This is how she repays me. She knows everything about the Miami and Hamptons operations. She was there. She participated. Now she wants immunity. There are no victims here, only willing partners who now want to save themselves. The safe houses need to be cleared out. Told redacted to wipe the security systems and move everything to the offshore accounts. A drive with the recordings needs to disappear. Too many recognizable faces there. Too many people who can't afford to be connected to what happened in those rooms. Redacted call from L.A. says there's a grand jury being convened. Someone talked. I made it clear what happens to people who talk. Made some calls to remind certain individuals what we have on in the protection circle needs to hold strong. Now we survived investigations before we made problems disappear. Before this diary is ever found, which it won't be. Let me make something clear. I built this empire I created. Kings and queens from nothing, their careers, their fame, their wealth, all because of me. They owe me everything, and they know what happens when debts aren't paid. The system is designed to protect people like us, law enforcement, judges, prosecutors. So many of them have been to the parties, taken the gifts, enjoyed the benefits of being in my circle. They can't touch me without touching themselves. Tomorrow, I meet with Redacted to finalize the contingency plan. If things go bad, the dead man's switch gets activated. Everyone goes down together. No one gets to. Walk away clean while I take the BR Day follow the list is in the secondary location 43 names videos. For each one, financial records, text messages, all of it. That's always been an insurance policy. That's why I've survived this long. Because I know if I go down, I'm taking. Everyone with me as the judge finished reading. He looked up at the courtroom. Diddy sat motionless, his face drained of color. His lead attorney had his head in his hands. The entry continues with a list of names. The judge said at this time these names will remain sealed as they are subject to ongoing investigation. However, the court notes that many of these individuals occupy positions of significant influence in entertainment politics. And law enforcement, the prosecutor, stood your honor we would like to enter this diary as Exhibit 47 and request that the defendant's bail be immediately revoked in light of this new evidence, which clearly demonstrates both consciousness of guilt and potential witness tampering. Diddy's attorney jumped to his feet. Objection. This document cannot be authenticated on the spot. We need time to examine it with our own experts. The judge raised his hand for silence. The diary will be entered into evidence as for bail revocation. He was interrupted by a commotion at the defendant's table. Diddy had suddenly lunged toward the diary, his face contorted with rage and fear. Marshals immediately restrained him as he shouted, "That's not mine, that's not mine, they're setting me up." It was the first crack in the carefully constructed image he had maintained throughout the trial. The judge banged his gavel repeatedly. Order, order in the court. When the room finally quieted, he spoke with steely resolve in light of the defendant's outburst and the content of this evidence. Bail is revoked. The defendant will remain in custody for the duration of this trial. Cyrus Diddy was led away. Reporters rushed from the courtroom to break the news. The diary had changed everything. After a brief recess, the proceedings continued with FBI Special Agent Melissa Rodriguez taking the stand to provide context for the diary's contents. What makes this diary so significant, Agent Rodriguez explained, is how it confirms the systematic pattern of control and exploitation that victims have described throughout this investigation. Using carefully selected excerpts from the diary, prosecutors painted a picture of how Diddy's operation functioned. According to his own words, he maintained control through a sophisticated system of surveillance, blackmail, and strategic alliances. The defendant describes what he calls a circle. Agent Rodriguez testified this was an inner group of trusted individuals who helped maintain control over victims and ensured silence. The diary contains multiple references to recording devices hidden in his properties, particularly in bedrooms and bathrooms. One particularly disturbing entry described how new artists or potential business partners will be invited to what appear to be normal industry gatherings, only to be guided to private rooms where they were secretly recorded in compromising situations. These recordings would later be used as leverage if the individuals attempted to break ties or speak out. The diary contains a dedicated section called Insurance. Agent Rodriguez continued where the defendant cataloged what material he had on which individuals and notes on how to best use that material. If necessary, the agent explained that the diary corroborated statements from multiple witnesses who had described receiving threatening messages or having their careers suddenly derailed after attempting to distance themselves from Diddy. One entry from 2018 explicitly states, reminded Redacted about the Hampton footage. Suddenly she's much more cooperative about the contract terms. Agent Rodriguez read, this matches exactly with witness R14 towards 14's testimony about how she was pressured to sign a disadvantageous contract after being threatened with release of compromising footage. The diary also detailed a network of properties some owned through shell companies that were used for activities away from public scrutiny. These locations were referred to as safe houses in the diary, with notations about which were clean, meaning free of recording devices, and which were wired, meaning equipped with hidden cameras and microphones, perhaps most. Damning with financial records interspersed throughout the diary. Diddy had meticulously tracked payments to what he called silence maintenance. Regular deposits to various individuals who had witnessed or been victimized by his actions. The defendant wasn't just paying people off the prosecutor, explained during questioning. He was keeping them financially dependent on him, ensuring they couldn't afford to speak out. Agent Rodriguez confirmed that financial records obtained during the investigation matched many of the payments noted in the diary, creating a paper trail that corroborated the written account. As this testimony continued, Diddy sat unnaturally still, his expression frozen in a mask of controlled panic. The confident demeanor he had maintained throughout the trial had completely evaporated. His eyes darted between his attorneys, the diary on the evidence table, and the exits, as if calculating his chances of escape. By the time Agent Rodriguez finished her testimony, the diary had transformed from a single piece of evidence into the keystone that connected all other aspects of the case: the testimonies, the financial records, the surveillance footage, and the threatening messages. It wasn't just Diddy on trial anymore. It was an entire system of power and exploitation. As the testimony about the diary continued, the courtroom was riveted by an unexpected witness called to the stand. Jason Mitchell, a former security specialist who had worked for Diddy from 2010 to 2019, approached the witness box with measured steps, his expression grim but determined. Mitchell had not been on the original witness list. The prosecution explained that he had come forward only after hearing about the discovery of the diary, finally convinced that the truth would come out regardless of his silence. "I was responsible for security at Mr. Combs' properties," Mitchell testified. "But that didn't just mean protecting him from outside threats. It meant ensuring that what happened inside stayed inside." His testimony corroborated many of the systems described in the diary. Mitchell explained how he had been instructed to install recording devices throughout Diddy's properties, focusing on bedrooms and gathering areas where guests would feel most relaxed and uninhibited. "We had a protocol," Mitchell explained, high-value targets, meaning celebrities or industry executives who Mr. Combs wanted leverage over, would be directed to specific rooms. Sometimes we'd even manufacture situations like pretending the plumbing was broken in their assigned room to move them to the rooms we had prepared. Mitchell described how recordings would be reviewed, cataloged, and stored in what staff referred to as a library, a secure digital archive accessible only to Diddy and his most trusted associates. Mr. Combs would sometimes review these recordings personally. Mitchell testified he would make notes about what could be used, who was vulnerable, who needed to be handled with care because they had their own power. As Mitchell spoke, Diddy's attorney repeatedly objected, challenging the relevance and credibility of the testimony. Each time the judge overruled, noting that the testimony directly corroborated information found in the diary. Mitchell then revealed something that caused a stir in the courtroom. He had been the one who installed the safe where the diary was found. Mr. Combs was paranoid about keeping certain things secure. Mitchell explained, "He had me install that safe behind a false wall in the Miami house. In 2017, he said it was for documents that could burn down the whole industry if they ever got out." The prosecutor presented Mitchell with photographs of the burnt safe. He confirmed it was the one he had installed, recognizing specific security features he had customized at Diddy's request. "Did Mr. Holmes ever tell you what he kept in the safe?" the prosecutor asked. "He said it contained his insurance policy," Mitchell replied. "He told me that if anything ever happened to him, I should access the safe using a code only he and I knew and deliver its contents to a specific attorney. He said it contained enough information to ensure that if he went down, everyone who ever crossed it would go down." To the statement caused Diddy to visibly react to composure, finally breaking completely as he leaned forward and whispered urgently to his attorney. Mitchell continued explaining that he had ultimately left Diddy's employment after witnessing incidents that troubled his conscience. He described gradually becoming aware that he wasn't just providing security, but was an active participant in a system of exploitation and control. "The breaking point for me came in late 2019, Mitchell testified, his voice growing quieter. "There was a situation where a young artist couldn't have been more than 20 years old. I watched as Mr. Combs systematically isolated this person, created dependency, and then he paused. Taking a deep breath, I saw the aftermath. I saw the person who walked into that house and the shell of a person who walked out 3 days later, and I knew I couldn't be part of it anymore. When asked why he hadn't come forward sooner, Mitchell's answer was simple and devastating fear. I've seen what happens to people who cross him. I've helped make it happen. And I knew too much. I wasn't just a witness. I was complicit. But when I heard about the diary being found, I realized there was finally a chance that the truth would come out with or without me, and I couldn't live with myself if I stayed silent any longer. As Mitchell's testimony concluded, the diary had been transformed from a simple document into the center of a vast web of control, manipulation, and criminality, a web that, according to both the diary and this new witness, extended far beyond Diddy himself to encompass numerous powerful figures in entertainment. And beyond, after Mitchell's testimony, the courtroom atmosphere was electric with tension. The prosecution called Dr. Eleanor Vasquez, a forensic psychologist who specialized in analyzing written documents for evidence of psychological patterns. Dr. Vasquez approached the diary not just as evidence of specific crimes, but as a window into the mindset of its author. Her analysis of the final entry was particularly damning. What we see in these last writings, Dr. Vasquez testified, is an individual who has developed a profound sense of entitlement and power over others. The language repeatedly dehumanizes people, referring to them as assets, investments, and properties rather than as individuals. She pointed to specific phrases from the diary that revealed a pattern of narcissistic control. They owe me everything. I created them from nothing. No one gets to walk away. These statements reflect a worldview in which other people exist primarily as extensions of the writers. Will Dr. Vasquez explained, there's no recognition of others' autonomy or right to make their own choices. As this testimony continued, something unexpected happened. Diddy, who had been growing increasingly agitated, suddenly stood up. "I want to speak," he announced, his voice cutting to the courtroom. His lead attorney immediately grabbed his arm, tried to pull him back to his seat, while whispering urgently in his ear. Diddy shook him off. "Your Honor," Diddy said, addressing the judge directly, "I need to address these lies." The judge's gavel came down sharply. "Mr. Combs, you are represented by counsel. If you wish to testify, that will happen in the proper order of proceedings." "That's not my diary," Diddy insisted, ignoring the warning. "That's not my handwriting. This is a setup." The judge banged his gavel again. "Mr. Combs, sit down immediately, or you'll be removed from the courtroom." Diddy remained standing, his composure completely gone. "Now you don't understand," he continued, his voice rising. "There are people who want me silenced, powerful people. This is a conspiracy to remove the jury," the judge ordered, and the 12 jurors were quickly ushered out. As Diddy continued to speak, once the jury was gone, the judge addressed Diddy directly. "Mr. Combs, this outburst is completely inappropriate. You are represented by capable counsel, and this is not the time for you to address the court." Diddy's attorney stood. "Your Honor, we request a brief recess to confer with our client." 3 meets. Judge agreed, and court was recessed for 30 minutes. When proceedings resumed, the atmosphere had changed dramatically. Diddy sat silently beside his attorneys, but his previous confident demeanor was gone entirely. He looked defeated, almost shell-shocked. His lead attorney addressed the court. "Your Honor, in light of the evidence presented today, we request a brief adjournment to discuss potential resolution options with the prosecution." The legal language was clear to everyone in the courtroom. They were opening the door to plea negotiations. The prosecutor responded with surprising firmness. "Your Honor, given the severity of the crimes detailed in the evidence and the defendant's apparent willingness to threaten witnesses, even from within these proceedings, the people are not interested in a plea arrangement at this time. We intend to proceed with the full prosecution." The judge then made an announcement that sent murmurs through the courtroom. "In light of today's evidence, I am ordering a special security protocol for this diary. It will be placed under 24-hour guard with access restricted to essential court personnel only. Additionally, I am ordering the U.S. Marshals to provide protection for all witnesses who have testified or are scheduled to testify in this case." He looked directly at Diddy. "Let me be absolutely clear. Any attempt to interfere with witnesses or evidence in this case will be met with the full force of this court's authority." As the day's proceedings drew to a close, the final confrontation wasn't just between Diddy and the justice system. It was between a man who had believed himself untouchable and the reality that his own words might finally bring his empire crashing down. The diary, rescued from flames that were meant to destroy it, had become the voice of countless victims who had been silenced for too long. The impact of the diary's discovery rippled outward like a shockwave through the entertainment industry, and beyond. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed as legal experts attempted to explain the significance of what had transpired inside. What we witnessed today wasn't just a turning point in the case against Sean Combs, said legal analyst Maya Richardson to a crowd of cameras. It potentially represents a watershed moment for how we understand power dynamics in the entertainment industry. This diary doesn't just implicate one man, it suggests an entire system of exploitation, protection, and silence. Social media exploded with reactions as news of the diary's content began to leak. The hashtag #ChargeOnAndrew Diddy Diary trended worldwide, with many expressing shock, while others sadly noted that rumors of such behavior had circulated for years, largely dismissed or ignored. Perhaps most telling was the immediate reaction from certain high-profile celebrities and executives within hours of the diary being entered into evidence. At least 3 private jets departed from Los Angeles bound for countries with limited extradition treaties, though no official connection was established. The timing was difficult to dismiss, as coincidental major entertainment companies issued carefully worded statements distancing themselves from Diddy, many emphasizing their commitment to creating safe work environments and zero tolerance for abuse of power, statements that rang hollow to critics who pointed out these same companies had maintained close business relationships with Diddy for decades. Despite persistent rumors, former employees and associates began coming forward with their own stories, no longer afraid of retaliation now that the protective shield of fear was cracking. Social media filled with accounts from people who claimed they had witnessed concerning behavior, but had been afraid to speak out. Law enforcement sources speaking on condition of anonymity confirmed that the names mentioned in the sealed portions of the diary had triggered multiple new investigations across several jurisdictions. There were reports of search warrants being executed at properties belonging to high-profile entertainment executives, and at least one elected official. Mental health professionals and victim advocates appeared on news programs discussing the psychological impact of systems of control, like the one described in the diary, explaining how power imbalances, especially in glamorous industries like entertainment, could create environments where abuse flourished undetected or unchallenged. For those watching from outside the industry, the revelations forced uncomfortable questions about the celebrities and content they consumed. Had they been unwittingly supporting a system that enabled exploitation? How many successful careers and hit songs have been built on foundations of abuse and coercion? As night fell on that momentous day, Diddy was transferred to a higher security facility as bail revoked. The man who had once moved through the world with the confidence of someone who believed himself untouchable was now confined to a cell, his empire crumbling around. In the diary, that simple leather-bound book that had survived a fire meant to destroy it had accomplished what years of rumors, whispers, and isolated accusations could not. Have connected the dots, transforming separate incidents into a clear pattern too powerful to ignore or dismiss. Legal experts predicted the trial would continue for weeks, possibly months, but something fundamental had shifted. The question was no longer whether Diddy would face consequences for his actions, but how many others would fall with him, and how deeply the entertainment industry would be forced to examine its darkest corners. As one survivor who had previously testified against Diddy told reporters, the diary proves what many of us have been saying for years, that this wasn't just about one man's actions. It was about a system that protected predators and silenced victims. Maybe now people will finally believe us. The story is far from over as investigators continue to work through the names and incidents detailed in the diary. More revelations are certain to come, but one thing is clear: the wall of silence that protected powerful abusers for decades has begun to crumble, and the entertainment industry will never be quite the same. If you found this report informative, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for ongoing coverage of this developing story. The truth deserves to be heard, and we're committed to bringing it to you as it unfolds.